Hello everyone, I'm Professor Geek, and welcome to day 29 of my 31 days of Halloween reviews. And if you've been sticking with me for any portion of the month, then chances are you know this one was coming today. We are going to talk finally about Batman's The Long Halloween by Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale. We've previously covered the other Halloween specials that Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale did within the Legends of the Dark Knight run in the 90s, so we covered fears and ghosts and so forth, and they're all collected in a single volume that we looked at. I'll have the links in the top right hand corner. But today we're finally here, finally at this great iconic work of Batman called The Long Halloween. Before you, I have just about all of my Batman 89 and Batman Returns paraphernalia out. I've explained before again that I don't think we'd have Batman The Long Halloween if it wasn't for Batman 89, the film. The popularity of that film spurred DC on to create another Batman title, which was Legends of the Dark Knight by Denny O'Neil at first. And Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale came on board as well and gave us some great Halloween stories. And then eventually they had an idea for a longer Halloween story, which is The Long Halloween that we're talking about now. Some of the little paraphernalia I've got out here first. These two here in the front are actually part of the downfall of the Tim Burton Batman universe. These were some of the McDonald's toys, the Happy Meal toys for Batman Returns. And that was one of the problems. Parents were saying, oh, you know, their toys and their Happy Meals, and the movie's so dark and blah, 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 and stupid ass parents. But anyway, everybody's falling down here. So kind of a neat little piece of history there. I've got my unopened Batmobiles, of course, and I can't bring myself to open these trading cards yet, these Batman trading cards. I will open them soon. I've got a nice little card collection with sleeves and stuff like that I like to put them in, but, you know, that's coming eventually. So I even have here, as part of my Batman, Tim Burton Batman, Michael Keaton Batman collection, a couple of the novelizations. Look at this. This is the novelization for the Batman 89 film. And they still sell these. I've seen them in the stores, but I'm happy to have this one, which was an original edition. And it's written by Dennis O'Neil. And these are just the graphic novel versions of the film. So they're nothing new, but really great. And Jerry Ordway did the art for this one. And I am just blown away by the likenesses that he can get. I mean, even the villains, I mean, the victims there, that's exactly how they looked in the film. And there's a scene here. The dresses that Vicky Vale wears, these are the ones she wears. Yeah, there we go. And I mean, that's Michael Keaton's face. I mean, that's just brilliant. That's Carl Grissom. That's, you know, Jack Palance, and just amazing likeness. So thought that was really cool. Just showing off now. And then I even have the novelization for Batman Returns, also written by Denny O'Neil. This time, Steve Irwin is doing the pencils, and the great Jose Luis Garcia Lopez is doing the inking. So you've got colors a little bit different because different colorists there, but still very impressive with the likenesses. I mean, look at Michelle Pfeiffer. They've just got her eyes down. Well, there's the Penguin as well. They've got Danny DeVito's makeup down perfectly. Again, Michael Keaton. Trying to find some good shots of, yeah, so there, look at, I mean, he's nailed Michelle Pfeiffer's eyes and her the wonderful look she had for her Catwoman. So really great stuff, just kind of showing that off. But anyway, back to The Long Halloween. Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale were both very taken with Frank Miller's Batman Year One. Far more so, they say, than his Dark Knight Returns, which was, you know, the big deal and all of that. And I completely agree with them. Year One is really great stuff. And so they wanted to kind of add on to that continuity, and that was the whole point of Legends of the Dark Knight. That title was supposed to be Batman in his early years anyway. So this made perfect sense. So the real work of The Long Halloween is to introduce Harvey Dent in his transition from Harvey Dent to Two-Face. So that's where this story falls in terms of continuity-wise. But there's just so much good here, I don't even know where to begin. So, first of all, if you've never read The Long Halloween, much of it will be very familiar to you because it's such an influential work. It influenced Christopher Nolan greatly, although he did not at all make a film version of this story, which I think would have been wonderful. He definitely stole a lot of plot points and a lot of little storylines from it, specifically in the Dark Knight film. So a lot of those little elements will be familiar. I tell my students all the time. We talked a little bit last time. We mentioned it briefly because I said we cover it at length this time. The art is amazing. The art is very film noir. It's not in black and white. It is in color, but even so, the tones are very cool, blue and gray, and there's those brilliant, every time a murder happens, suddenly the page is black and white, except for the red blood, which is a great touch. So they really are playing with some great stuff there. And a lot of that credit goes to Gregory Wright, who we've already seen this month with the covers to the Batman Nevermore series that we looked at in a previous video, which was the Batman Edgar Allan Poe team up, and Gregory Wright did the beautiful covers for that. So he's the colorist here. So you've got Tim Sale, and I've gone on ad nauseum about how much I love Tim Sale's work and the way he stylizes Batman in his universe. So Tim Sale doing some amazing, both the penciling and the inking, and then you have Gregory Wright laying over this wonderful film noirish coloring over everything. So just a wonderful effect there. What I'd really like to talk about in this review, though, is just how well of and how literary even, of a story this really is. So I've talked a lot in previous videos, too, about how Batman at his core archetype is a detective, is a gothic detective, and that means something, and he should be told, stories should be told about him in a certain way because of that. And they really understood it here in this tale, and in all of Loeb and Sale's work, really. So he's a detective archetype, and the detective story originated with Edgar Allan Poe and his Monsieur Auguste Dupin and a few of his stories there, Murders of the Rue Morgue and so forth. And those were just really logic problems that Poe was providing for his readers in the magazines that he edited and such. But Arthur Conan Doyle took the whole idea and took the basic setup of those tales and created them and placed more narrative in them and really fleshed out the idea of the detective story. So we have that, but then in the 20s and 30s, in America, the hard-boiled detective came around. And this is right around the same time that Batman's coming around, coming out of the pulp magazines with the characters like the Shadow and the Spider and Black Bat and so forth. So very much tied to the detective archetype, but specifically this hard-boiled detective archetype. And there are some differences. So, for example, Batman in the old great Batman 66 show with Adam West and Burt Ward, that's a little bit more of a traditional detective story because you've got your detective who's a little eccentric. He dresses up like a bat, right? And he's so brilliant, though. He's an amazing detective. And he's got a sidekick who isn't quite as brilliant as the main detective, who would be Robin here, or sometimes Commissioner Gordon if he's in the room or whatever, or Chief O'Hara or whatever. But you need a sidekick to kind of bridge the audience to the detective and his brilliance and the way he's sort of a little bit out there. Now, of course, Batman 66 was theater of the absurd as well, so that complicates the whole thing, but that's just a general idea. So you can have Batman stories that are in that traditional detective story archetype, and we see that everywhere today. I mean, certainly Sherlock Holmes and Watson, and we've seen it in all kinds of detective stories in television shows, from Monk to Psych to The Mentalist and all kinds of things. The detective has to be a little eccentric or a little out there in some way, maybe lacking in some social skills. And Batman's like that. Batman doesn't lack in social skills. He's Bruce Wayne. He can play the brilliant socialite very well. But the fact that he far prefers to be alone in his Batcave, down below the ground, doing his mission that he's so fixated on. And this was the story that really started that too. This is the story that really took that idea of him making a promise to his parents. It didn't originate here, but they really drew that out and made it a strong element that I think Chris Nolan picked up on as well, and as well as the makers of some of the Arkham games and stuff. I mean, so much has come from so many great things we have about Batman today we wouldn't have without this title, without the Jeff Loeb, Tim Sale Batman stories in general, but specifically the Batman The Long Halloween. So let me try and get back on focus here. Batman comes from the hard-boiled detective archetype even more directly. And the hard-boiled archetype is usually someone who works alone, and Batman has worked alone. He's also worked with many different people, but in these early stories from the Legends of the Dark Knight, he was working alone. He would just have a contact with Commissioner Gordon. And in these stories, hard-boiled detective stories specifically, the police are just really powerless, either because they're just incompetent or corruption or whatever, and in Gotham City, the case is certainly corruption, right? So that's the issue there. And the hard-boiled detective is out there restoring boundaries in a city or in a world or in a society or whatever that everything's crumbling and there's no definite boundaries between justice and revenge or right and wrong, safety and danger. It's just everything's sort of crumbling into chaos. You have a hard-boiled detective come in who's going to restore these boundaries and do what only he can do. And this is what we have Batman for. Now, Loeb and Sale don't just tell Batman in this story as a typical film noir, horrible detective story and just leave it in sort of a trite cliche like that at all. They really flesh it out because in this story we have a MacGuffin. If you never heard the term MacGuffin, that's just bandied about quite a bit. It was really, I think, coined by Alfred Hitchcock. There was an old joke, as Hitchcock tells it, where I believe it was two men on a train to London, and one man has this huge gun in his lap, this weird-looking gun, and the other man says to him, "What is that?" And he says, "Oh, this is a MacGuffin." And he said, "What's a MacGuffin?" He says, "Oh, MacGuffin's used to shoot elephants." And the other man says, "Well, there are no elephants in London." And the other guy says, "Oh, well, I guess it's not a MacGuffin then." Stupid, kind of silly joke. But the point is, it didn't matter what the MacGuffin is, so long as the MacGuffin's there. I know that doesn't really make a lot of sense, but let me explain. So Hitchcock, for example, would always have his characters in his movies very intent on a certain purpose, or their whole thing that drives the plot is to find out who killed this person or to clear the guy's name, or something like that. For example, in Psycho, the money that Janet Leigh's character steals in the beginning, that's the MacGuffin. Because by the end of the story, you realize, actually, the movie's not really about the money. Who cares about the money? The money sinks in the river and the lake anyway. No one ever finds it. The story's really about Norman Bates and the hotel, and is he going to be caught, and is he going to be stopped, and it's really about his story and what's happening to him and how he's doing all of this. So that's the idea of a MacGuffin. And why would you have a MacGuffin? Well, it's because it can add suspense, it can add a lot of layers. It's a little bit of misdirection to your audience so that you can really do a lot of work behind the scenes and develop some psychological overtones and suspense. And that's what a good film noir film does, or should do anyway. So they really bring this element in. There is a MacGuffin in The Long Halloween, and I'm not going to ruin it for you if you've never read it, but I will give you a little bit of analysis here because I just can't help myself. I love this work so much, and I'm used to talking about it and really picking it apart in depth with my students. So you have this holiday killer is a mysterious, we don't know who the holiday killer is, and it's somebody who is committing a murder on every single holiday. And there's some ideas, they think is this person or this person, and Harvey Dent is working with Commissioner Gordon and Batman, and they're trying to find this person. But in the end, you realize that the identity of the holiday killer is the MacGuffin, because you don't even really have a firm, definite answer of who it was in the end. You can kind of piece together some strands of evidence and stuff like that. And okay, this person, this is, I won't give it away, but that's the MacGuffin. It really doesn't matter because the story is truly about Harvey Dent and his descent into his own personal madness into becoming Two-Face, and then how that affects the people around him and specifically the city as well, and Batman and Batman's mission and how this affects Batman going forward. So the whole Batman universe. And it's a wonderful story that really takes this character of Two-Face and develops him and makes him something that he hasn't really been before. Now, the Batman the Animated Series and their wonderful Two-Face two-part, I do believe that came out before this. That was 92, 94 or something like that when the series started, and this series began in 96. These stories were first published anyway. So Two-Face did have a more serious and in-depth treatment in the Batman Animated Series already. But this one took it a little bit farther with a little bit more depth that you can bring for a longer written story. And Two-Face is a great character because any villain should mirror the hero in some sort of way. And Two-Face does that. The Joker mirrors Batman. Batman's all about order and self-control and justice, and the Joker's total chaos, right? He's the antithesis of all of that. And so that's like a typical kind of, mirror, polar opposite idea of hero and villain. But Two-Face is interesting because Two-Face is kind of part Batman and almost part Joker. And I think that's something that they really dwell on nicely here in Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale's Batman. And it's something Chris Nolan did quite well developing in The Dark Knight, even though Nolan isn't really telling a detective story, sadly, with that film. But Two-Face is failing at resolving the conflict within himself. And it's the same conflict in a way that Batman has within himself. He's two people as well. He's wealthy, socialite, playboy, billionaire Bruce Wayne, and he's the Dark Knight of Gotham City, and the one who's out there working hard and very serious for vengeance. And he's always having a little bit of trouble reconciling the two and deciding how much time to spend on one and the other. And Batman stories are always trying to delve into that aspect of who is he really? Is he really Batman or is he really Bruce Wayne? And then that was something that Nolan was very focused on and kind of obsessed over in a lot of his films. He likes those identity issues. I personally think that the Batman stories work best when they take the approach that the Tim Burton Batman films took. And I talk about that with my students too, because I show that Burton's Batman is not bisected. He's not two people in there. He's not Bruce Wayne and Batman. He's one whole person with these multiple sides, and they come out in different ways. And I cite, for example, the wonderful scene when he goes to Vicky Vale's apartment to tell her, with the intent of telling her that he's Batman. He doesn't, because the Joker shows up and kind of foils his plan there. But you see these different facets to him come out in this conversation that he has with Vicky Vale, because he's nervous, right? He doesn't know how to tell her that he's Batman. He does like her, and he doesn't want to scare her off. At the same time, he wants to be honest, and he's never done this before. This is new to him. So you see him as a little unsure and maybe a little anxious, but then at times you see the Batman really come through. At one point, he just kind of pushes her down on the couch and says, look, you're a really nice person, I like you now, but right now I need you to shut up because I need to tell you something. That's just such a great moment, and you have all these little hints, and that just makes a character far more profound and far more interesting, I think, than just having somebody who's a divided type of personality. I think that's kind of a cheap way out sometimes. Not that that can't be interesting, but again, I think that's kind of the lazy writer's way to approach something when it's far more interesting if you as a writer can integrate the character. And I personally think Batman works best like that. So that's Batman in the Long Halloween. Again, I could just sit here and talk for a flippin' hour, if not more, about this book specifically, but I told myself again that for these reviews, I don't want to ruin them. I don't want to give in-depth analysis so much as give reviews that people can go and look for. I will say that the story is all about Halloween. Obviously, it's in the title. It does follow throughout an entire year, but it begins in Halloween. So you got the Halloween imagery and the Halloween theme all the way through it. It's definitely one of the canon pillar Batman titles. So if you are a Batman fan, this is one of the books that you just need to have read. Really, it's so amazing. And it's easily available anywhere. You can find it digitally on Comixology and Amazon. You can find it in the wonderful paperback cover I have here. I'd like to get a nice hardback cover of it eventually. That would be nice. So I will go ahead and just force myself to stop now. Come back tomorrow. We only have a couple of days left, but they're good ones, and we're going to cover a couple more titles and finish out this Halloween with a bang. Again, I appreciate everybody who's been along for the ride, sharing it with friends. The subscriptions have grown immensely this month, and we are just a very short amount away from our 250 goal that we've set to do the giveaway. So again, that title I mentioned, The Batman Nevermore, Batman Edgar Allan Poe Team Up by the great Len Wein, and covers by the wonderful Wrightson. I'm going to give away issue 1. So share it around. We just need really a handful more of subscriptions, and then I will enter all the names of people who commented on the videos into a randomizer and pick the lucky winner. So let me know what you think about The Long Halloween. Have you read it? Do you agree that it's one of the canon titles that any Batman fan should definitely read? What about Batman 89? I think so many people are just unaware of it. They think everything that happened before Chris Nolan was just bat nipples and Schumacher, and they don't really realize that, oh, Burton had a different vision. And no, it wasn't the Batman of the comics necessarily. I mean, there was some liberties there taken, but I still think it was the best film we've had thus far. So that's that. Anyway, I will see you tomorrow. Come back for another Halloween story that is superhero and/or comic book related. Until then, keep enjoying and digging deeper into those Halloween and superhero stories you love best. Thanks for watching.